All right, so as you know, it's been a big whole story here. It started with Mayo calling the team soft. Now it's kind of evolved into Bourne talking about how players kind of went out in London and how you have to be more focused when you take a trip like that. Then you think about it. And Pop Douglas played a couple game plays and then had to come out because he was sick. You have the KJ Osborne putting weird crap from his friend up on Instagram. Jalen Polk seems like a mess. What? How out of control is this gotten, and what are you hearing happened in London?
There's a lot going on in the receiver room for sure, right?
Yeah.
I haven't heard a lot of specifics about what went on in London, but it doesn't surprise me to hear some of that stuff because I think there is a natural inclination with players to let go of the rope when the season starts to slip away, especially if you're on a trip like that. So again, I don't know any specifics of anything. I haven't had the chance to dig into all of that yet, but this is a danger, and I think you can kind of tie it into Christian Barmore being laid out late at night and having the thing with the police, and the Peppers thing's obviously way, way, way more serious, but that's still another thing after midnight. You know what I mean? Like that's happening on a game weekend. So, um, I think it's part of being a bad team, and it's something the Patriots haven't had to deal with in a long time, where it feels like they're out of it this early in the season, and it feels like sort of they're playing for things like draft position and player development, and I mean they're playing for 2025 in the future now. And I've used this line a bunch with you guys. Like no player cares about your 3-year plan, right? They care about the here and the now. When the here and the now looks kind of hopeless, sometimes this is what you get.
I'm wondering, of all the people that you've talked to in the last week, how has Gerard Mayo's soft comment been received? And I bring this up because I saw Richard Sherman on your broadcast after the game. He was not
Yeah.
a big fan of it. Who have you talked to? Well, you can't tell me specifics, but of all the people you've talked to, are they pro Mayo or against Mayo?
I still think the players like Mayo. Respecting him as a leader, like that's something that needs to be earned day in, day out, and I think that's really where this really hurts him. There is nothing worse than you can call a pro football player than soft. And it's sort of the ultimate insult. And I think part of the problem is that the players are looking around and a lot of things are going wrong right now. And if you're one of the players, you sort of feel like I just got the finger pointed at me and my coach wasn't also looking inward. It's like why Bill used to always say before he criticized any part of his team, like almost everything was always prefaced by we got to coach it better. Almost everything. And that's why is because um, you know, you can't hold somebody else accountable if you're not holding yourself accountable. And I'm not saying Gerard isn't internally holding himself accountable, like isn't in between the walls of that building, taking blame for what's happening. But I mean, if you're gonna publicly put somebody on blast like that, then you sort of need to be willing to do it to yourself too. And so I don't think that comment was received really well. And I think the trouble becomes now that this is like the third or fourth time he's gone back on something he said, and so the messaging coming out of the building is kind of messy right now. Um, it feels like a coach who isn't quite ready for the job he's in, which I think is in part because the timeline the Patriots had set up didn't actually match up with the reality, where I think they probably envisioned Bill being the head coach for another year or two and Gerard getting another year or two to develop into that. And instead, here they are in 2024. And again, it looks like the head coach isn't quite ready for the role he's in.
Could they fire him after the season?
I doubt it. I mean, I don't know, Fred. Like, I think, I mean, I have two thoughts on that. Number one, I remember hearing this with McVay, and talking to Rams people about this with McVay, and part of their logic in hiring Sean in 2017 was, if we don't hire him now, someone else will, and we'll never get a chance to hire him again. So better a year too early than a year too late, right?
How'd McVay do his first year?
pretty freaking well.
Yeah, because he seems, dollar for dollar. I would say McVay might be the best coach in the NFL. That's not way off base.
If there was somebody you would hire right now for the next 10 years, I mean, like you can make the argument with Andy, of course. Like
Right?
Andy
Yeah.
I mean, Andy, I think would be like the most accomplished.
Sure.
John Harbaugh is really good, and has proven it over and over and over again. Both those guys are in their 60s.
Mm.
If you're talking about like who would you hire for the next 10 years? I mean, I actually think two of the five guys were probably on the field last night. I think Kevin's that good too. But Sean I think Sean would probably be number one, based on what he's accomplished, how consistent they've been. But yeah, I mean, like that's the point I'm making, is that it was like the Rams' logic was, and I remember one of their higher ups using this line to me. It's like better a year too early than a year too late. And, I think that's sort of the logic with Gerard. The risk you take in that is, I think, unfolding in front of us right now.
So one of the things we were talking about earlier this week, Bert, was all right, probably not.
By the way, just to clear that up, it obviously wasn't a year too early with Sean. Sean was up, but that was the risk.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
But the one thing that could change things for Mayo, obviously, if things are just in complete disarray, but more specifically, if he somehow impedes or damages Drake Maye in some way, where it looks like, the people are oddly optimistic about this team, even with their record right now and the losses, because Drake Maye looks good. If he starts to look worse and people point to the coaching or the head coach as a reason why he's regressing, then I think that could change things even after just a 1-year stint.
Yeah, and I think it goes beyond the head coach for that though, Hardy. It's like, what have you put around him? It's the offensive line. It's, again, like that was one reason why I thought the spot they put him in to start was early, a week early. Like I would have thrown him in there against Jacksonville maybe, or against Miami the week before, rather than having his first experience be against Houston. And, having to go up against those pass rushers and Will Anderson and Daniil Hunter with the line that he had in front of him. And I think that like honestly becomes a huge part of like the decision-making process. This is where I get to the second piece of it, right? Which is, do you feel like your young quarterback is in good hands? And I think, for all the problems that they've had and for everything that they've been through, if they can somehow get to a point where like the last month of the season looks really good, right? And they really their schemes start to take hold, and Drake Maye looks really, really good. Well, then you're going to be in a position where it's like, well, we don't want to flip the apple cart upside down now on the young quarterback. I brought up the 93 Patriots as an example. You can go and look up what that team was like, but I remember that was Parcells' first year. I believe, Zoe was on that team. I believe they were 1-11 and won their last 4 in a row.
That's correct.
So you remember Wallach.
Yep.
And then, I think the other example would be the Niners in 17 in Kyle Shanahan's first year. They were awful. They were like 0-9 or whatever it was, like really horrible. And then they trade for Jimmy, and they wait a few weeks to put Jimmy in the lineup. And I believe they ripped off 5 wins in their last 6 games or something like that. So I think that's what you want to look like. The flip side is if it doesn't look that way, and now you're concerned about the development of your young quarterback, and now you're thinking to yourself, we can't waste another year with the current setup. And I think the one kind of twist in this whole thing to me that the one, and I think Gerard gets a second year, and I think Gerard's still got a lot of potential as a head coach. I mean, I've been around him enough, and I know enough people who know him really well. Like I think he's still got great potential as a head coach. But the one thing that could be kind of the wrench in this whole thing for him is the availability of Mike Vrabel. And like if the Crafts look at it, like if we don't hire Mike now, we're not going to get a shot to, because he's going to go somewhere else.
Yep.
So that's the one wrench that I can see thrown in this whole thing, where it's like this is our only opportunity to bring Mike Vrabel home, so we need to do it.
Okay, so before Maye played, I can't remember what your thoughts were on it, but there were some people that were around the team saying you got to play Drake Maye because he's the best quarterback, and the team's going to see that, and if you don't play him, you're going to lose the team. Well, it seems like look, Drake Maye's.
He is the best quarterback. He may be losing the team anyway.
Yeah. That's my point. Is like
Yeah.
first of all, Drake Maye looks great in my opinion, and I think that that's all you really need to care about this season. I mean, that's ultimately the bottom line. But beyond all that, the team all this is happening since Maye took over. Really,
Yep.
I mean, is there any correlation to that, or is it just the season's going on and they're bad? Because when Brissett was playing, the games were boring and tight. It seems like things got worse since Maye's come in.
You mean just as far
As attitude, as far as Mayo and the locker room
I
and
think that's
guys
probably
going out
more.
and go ahead.
I think that's Fred. I think that's probably still more like a function of the record, though, don't you? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
Like,
do, but I just wonder.
I mean, it's
how you said you're
between-
playing for today. I just now that it's just a thought. But like, I wonder if players are like, all right, well, this season's just about the development of Maye.
Yeah,
So,
I don't think. I think it's more just the overall record. I mean,
Okay.
there's a difference between being 1-3 and 1-6, right? Like the hole is much deeper, and at 1-3, you can still talk yourself into, well, we could probably get to 9 wins, and then maybe if the conference is down, we get in. At 1-6, everybody knows, I mean, they're not going to the playoffs, and
Don't say that.
and I think that's where the challenge becomes. I mean, challenge for the coaches becomes, okay, like how do we keep motivating them? How do we get them going on a week to week basis? I brought up the examples of Parcells and Shanahan. That's like one thing. Like I would say like that you got to give Dan Campbell a lot of credit for in Detroit that first year. Like they didn't really turn it around much at the end of the year. I mean, they won a couple of games, but it wasn't like they ran off a winning streak. But he kept those guys locked in. And the reason why is because we made a change on offense, right? So he changed play callers on offense. He had shown the players that he and his staff were going to do a good job continuing to develop them as individual players. And he had convinced the people in that locker room that we're really going somewhere if you stick to this. And that becomes the challenge for Gerard Mayo now. For the guys who are going to be free agents, it's like you need to prove to me that you're going to continue to individually develop me, and then you're going to help me put good tape out so I can go get a contract somewhere next year. And for the guys who are younger, who are under contract for a while, you got to show them that you're building towards something, right? So it is the guys like Jalen Polk and Drake Maye and Caden Wallace and Layden Robinson and that rookie class, and then some of the second year players like Christian Gonzalez, Keon White, where it's like you have to show them like we are headed somewhere with this if you just stick to it, and maybe it won't result in wins, but we're going to take it somewhere. I mean, I think Dan Campbell's maybe the best example of that because I believe they went 1-6 at the beginning of the next year too.
Yeah.
And the guys just stayed locked in, and it was very clear what brand of football they were going to play when they got good. And then all of a sudden, just the switch flipped halfway through his second year, and they've been a totally different team since.
And plus, they have drafted so exceptionally well.
Yeah. I mean, they're that's obviously. I mean, in the end, you got to have good players too.
No, but Dan Campbell, I mean, everyone thought was a buffoon, myself included. I mean, he seemed like a buffoon. But you've said, I've actually told this to people, but you've said, part of that might have been by design, make everyone think that you're one way, and then
when you're actually the smartest guy in the room,
right? Which is
everybody think you're the meathead when you're actually.
I remember that they were 1-6. They came to Foxborough. They were horrible when they were here. They got blown out, I think, by the Patriots, like something like 29-0, and then 3 weeks later, they took off. They were 1-6. They finished 9-8.
I'll be at the game on Sunday, so look for a Patriots win.
If you like that clip, and how could you not? Check out more videos from Toucher and Hardy here. Point slightly up and to the left. For more Patriots analysis and opinion, hit this playlist. Point slightly down and to the left. And for the latest from the Sports Hub, download at 985thesportshub.com.